everybody, this is RChaotic here with a positioning guide for Overwatch 2. This is just a quick start guide to get you to hit the ground running, so you know what to do. This is not hero specific, though we will use examples from heroes. The position. What do you need to know to position well? You need to know the nature of your character. You need to know how your character behaves, like what range you're good at, what abilities they have, what setup do you need to use those abilities. You need to know your place in the team. This means a lot of things, like where your place is on the map compared to the rest of the team, but also what your role is in the team. A support is different from a DPS wildly in their role in the team. It also changes their position. Where you're going to want your Zenyatta is different from where you're going to want your Tracer in your team, and much more different than where you're going to want your Zarya or Diva. Know the enemy team. Depending on what the enemy team is running affects your position. Depending on how the enemy team enters a fight also affects your position. Next is know the map. This is kind of a duh, because positioning is relative to every other position on the map. High ground is only important because it's higher relative to the low ground. Know the map, know where you need to go to get from point X to point Y, and know how each bit of position works with each other position. Know what makes a good position. Now that we've talked about all of these things that will influence our decision making when it comes to getting a position, we need to know what parts of the map make a good position. And there are some heuristics for this that apply to every character. Know your character. One of the first questions you're going to have to ask yourself is, what is the ideal range for your hero or character? What range do they thrive at? Is the hero a medium to long range hero? So if you've got a medium to long range hero, you're going to want to position yourself farther away from the enemy in a high ground area. More on why this is later, but if you're a medium to long range hero, you don't necessarily even need to be with your team. You need to be farther back. You do not provide as much value up in the front where you're likely to die. Is it a dive or a brawl hero? If you're new to Overwatch, you might not know what dive is or brawl is, but a dive hero is a hero that goes and chases down one specific enemy target in the backline. Called dive because of Winston's ability, where he jumps up and then dives down to hit a target. That's where it comes from. The character is going or diving in and attacking this one target to try and kill them fast. A brawl hero is a hero that wants to be up in the fight, taking hits, dealing hits, stopping the enemy. Like, a brawl hero is all about being right there in the middle of the fight. And the position for your brawl hero is not going to be like a Soldier 76 who's on the high ground, probably behind a wall, just peeking out and shooting. Your brawl hero is in the fight. His position is where the fight is. So that's kind of the difference. You have medium to long range heroes who are in the back, typically behind cover, like behind big walls or buildings. Think of the statue King's Row as cover. And in the high ground, think of the buildings in King's Row. And they are getting their value from being hard to reach, shooting the enemy. What is the ideal case for your abilities? Now, what I mean by this is, in what scenario do your abilities function such that you get the maximum value from them? Let's think of Ana's anti-nade, okay? What is Ana's anti-nade? It's a little grenade you chuck that when it on impact, primarily the two things it does is heals all of your teammates that are in the impact and causes no healing, and some damage to be done to all the enemies in the impact. So why is this important for positioning? Well, the way anti-nade works is it is hard to hit it on the ground against the enemy. It's not hard, but if they have a shield, it's hard. If they are playing in behind walls, they might duck behind the wall as you go to throw it, and you might find it hard to get an anti-nade off. Whereas if you were on the high ground, you might find it easier to chuck a grenade over the enemy shield or over the enemy defensive position or a wall and be able to land a big anti-nade on the enemy. So when you're looking at Reinhardt, you want to think, what is the ideal case for this hero's ability? Now for Fire Strike, it's where you can hit as many of the enemies at once. And how do you do that? Through a choke point where all the enemies kind of have to walk together. Just be thinking about this. What is the ideal use of my ability? How do I put myself in a scenario to capitalize on it? That's what positioning is placing yourself in a scenario. You're setting yourself up for success before the battle begins. Every hero is unique. Every hero is unique. Since we're talking about abilities, great segue into the next point. And like, each hero is so unique just because of their abilities and their primary fire, their gun, and how they interact with their ultimates. Each hero is so unique. The positioning for each hero could be its own video. So no need to go into it here. Just know, because each hero is unique, you need to know in what area does your hero play best. You need to do some research. You need to play a few games of it. You need to think. If you know where your hero plays best, you are set up to take a good position. If you know that Soldier plays best when he can look down on the enemy from a range and he can shoot at them without being pressured, you're going to put him in the high ground back behind your tank so he can shoot down on the people the tank's fighting, or on squishies in the back, and you can try and find lines and plays to kill the enemy. On the contrary, like, if you know where your hero plays best, you won't put them in scenarios they won't excel at. Can you imagine a frontline Widowmaker? Neither can I. Don't do it, because you know Widowmaker plays best when she has long sight lines to see an enemy from super long range and try and get an enemy who doesn't expect it. Like, a sniper is absolutely mad playing in the front line. Know where your hero plays best, but know where they don't play best. Next is know your place in the team. Now, this is kind of complex, but it's sort of know what role you play in the team. Like, here I have, the team is 3 roles: tank, DPS, and support. Know which one of those you are. You kind of have to know. You selected it when you queued up for the match. But also, know using your character where your character is supposed to be in relation with all of the other characters in the middle of the game. So let's talk about the tank here. The tank should be in a place too. Pressure the enemy team. This is also called making space. Look at this Reinhardt here. This Reinhardt could be, obviously not when a dragon's in the middle of the bridge, but the Reinhardt could be on the bridge playing around here and keeping all of his enemies safe in the point, but also pressuring the enemy, keeping them from coming into the point. This is what pressuring the enemy team and making space is. Not something easy to define, not really the point of this. The point is not to tell you how to make space as a tank, but the point is, you're the one who is the first point of contact with the enemy. You're the one who is taking the damage and pushing the enemy back. You also, your role is to save and help the rest of the team. If there's a Tracer or a Genji in your backlines killing your supports, it's your job, if you can, to try and save them. Especially if you're a tank like D.Va or Zarya. You have to constantly be aware, even while you're on the front line, brawling with the enemy. Is there anybody in the backline killing my supports? Because once your supports die, you're dead. Generally, the tank should be in the front of the team, like I just said. Like, take a look at this Reinhardt here. What's he gonna do if he's in the backlines with that shield? What's he gonna do in the backlines with a close range hammer? Absolutely nothing. This is true for a lot of heroes, like Doomfist. What good does Doomfist do in the backline shooting? He doesn't. He's supposed to be in the front knocking them around. What good does Wrecking Ball do in the backline? Like shooting like a bad Bastion. You're supposed to, roll into the enemy. Almost every tank is designed to be a tank in the front line that pushes the enemy back, that commands the enemy's attention. This is a bit different for dive teams. Dive teams play differently. If you don't know what dive is, I explained a little bit ago, where you find one target and you focus them down. A dive is like typically a Winston or a D.Va as a tank, and then Trace or Sombra as the DPS, and all 3 of those characters go and gang up on either like a support and take them down. Tangential to the point here, it is a bit different for dive teams. You have the most health as a tank, getting back on point, and you are typically good with damage blocking abilities. You always have the most health. You even have some armor sometimes. More ability to stay alive. Also, you have damage blocking abilities. I think every tank has damage blocking abilities. Reinhardt has his shield. Doomfist puts his fist up and absorbs some damage. Zarya has her bubble. Winston has his shield. Hammond is the only one who doesn't block damage, but he knocks the enemies out of the way. D.Va has a defense matrix. Other than Wrecking Ball, every character, and Junker Queen, every character can block damage, and those characters block damage, air quotation marks, by knocking the enemy out of place so that they can't really do damage to your supports, they have to do damage to you. And just like I said, up above, you apply the most pressure to the enemy team. You're commanding their attention. You're in their face. You have to be in the front to do this. So where is your place as a tank? It's at the front lines, keeping the people in the back lines safe. DPS have the most varied played styles out of all of the roles. Just to name a few, snipers like Widowmaker, divers like Tracer, Genji, mid-range heroes like Soldier 76, spammers like Junkrat. Where is a good position depends heavily on the character. A good position for Tracer is not the same good position for Soldier. In fact, if you try and play Soldier like Tracer and like going off on flanks, you're not going to get the same results. Your goal is to find picks or kills. Pick is just another word for kill. Your goal is to get around the enemy tank and find their DPS, find their supports, and kill them, deal damage to them, knock them out. You are squishy and do not want to take damage. Most DPS have 200 health. Some have less, some have a little bit more. To take 20 damage is a tenth of your health. You can take 10, 20 damage shots. There are a lot of shots that deal more than 10 damage, and a lot of ones that deal less, but shoot faster. You don't want to be taking damage. Almost every DPS character, and almost every character, wants high ground for many reasons, and we'll come back to this later. But as a DPS, unless you're like a Tracer or a Sombra, you should be looking for the high ground and occupying the high ground and denying the enemy high ground. As Soldier 76, think of Toronto, Queen Street. You want to go occupy that bridge at the top or the high ground by the bridge, and from there you can look down on the enemy. Being on the high ground makes it easier to get headshot, stop from getting headshot, a bunch of positive things. You want to keep the enemy from having that. You want to have that. In most teams, you do want to be behind the tank to mitigate damage taken. This also depends on the DPS. Obviously, for some DPS, it just doesn't really matter where you are in relation to the tank as long as you're in good high ground cover areas. But if you've got a Reinhardt, you should generally let the Reinhardt go in front of you, right? So you can use his shield, so you can use the fact that his hit box is so massive. If you've got a Doomfist, you should let the Doomfist engage the enemy first. Then you should attack. Then you should go in yourself. Generally, if you're in front of the tank, you're just more likely to die. And you are so much more likely to die to a tank because you are squishy, you have 200 health, almost no armor, if you even have armor. You don't want to be in the front taking the hits. Supports. Most supports are easy to kill, squishy targets, and most of them don't deal as much damage as the DPS does. You need to be in defensible positions like high ground or hiding behind cover, often both. You need to be out of the way, you need to be hard to kill, because if the enemy can get to you through your teammates, you are dead most likely. You need to be in proximity to be helped and help your teammates. If you are too far away from your teammates and you're isolated, you can be easily picked by an enemy chasing you down, and then they've won that fight because your team's down a support, and now they can kill the rest of the team that much easier. You don't want to be out of position in relation to your team. The supports and the tanks are the two most important roles in where are you compared to your team, because most of the time you want it to be easy for your tank to get to you. Not all the time. This doesn't all the time apply. You either want to be easy, like you don't want to be caught out in the open. If you watch a good Zenyatta player or a good Ana player, they're up on the high ground behind cover. And the reason this is because the only way for the enemy to get to them is to go through their team, to go through all of the Ana's teammates. That's the only way to get to the Ana in that position. And you can't just shoot the Ana at range because she can just hide behind the cover. Most supports want to see the entire fight. Now what this means is you want to have line of sight to every participant in the battle. The reason this is you want to heal those that need help. Think about Baptiste. Like, what good is Baptiste if he only sees one character? All the characters on your team are likely to need healing, but if you can only see one because your position is bad, then you're not likely to succeed, right? Because you can only heal that one player. Think about Mercy. If, as Mercy, you're locked on only one hero and you're only healing or damage boosting one hero, you're not thinking about the other heroes, then those other heroes are going to die. You also need to damage enemies when needed. This isn't important as a support, but it is good if you're Baptiste and everybody's healed up that you can take a second and fire at the enemy to hit abilities. So if you can't see the fight, how are you going to drop an immortality field on your team? You can't, because you can't see them to drop one on them. That's an example of you need line of sight to use your abilities, and you need to see everybody in your team, because you need to heal everybody in your team. How are you going to sleep the enemy if you can't see the enemy? How are you going to Orb of Discord or Orb of Harmony somebody if you can't see them? Almost every healer needs to see everybody. This means long sightlines is key for a lot of heroes, a lot of support heroes. Zenyatta and Ana both want to be in the backlines, on high ground, far away from the fight, just spamming their abilities, keeping their teammates alive, focusing down the enemy with their abilities that focus down the enemy, like Orb of Discord or Anti-Nade. But you don't want to be in the fight doing that, because that makes it easy for you to die. There are a few exceptions. Brigitte, Lucio, those characters excel in the middle of the fray, booping, providing rally effects. There are exceptions, but generally you want to be farther back in a defensible position where if you're getting shot out from far away, you can just duck behind cover. And you need to be behind the tank such that if they want to get to you, they have to go through your tank, maybe some of your DPS first. You need to be in the best place to provide value to your team. An example of this is like a tank in the backline does not provide value. I explained this earlier. What good does a Reinhardt shield do you in the backline? And like, an Ana doesn't provide value if she's in front of the Reinhardt shield. Why is it? Because the Ana will get gunned down. Think of how your character provides value in relation to all the other characters. And how does your character help those other characters provide value? Reinhardt's shield provides value to the team by keeping them alive. You need to be in a spot to utilize that shield good. What is that spot? In front of the team. Ana does not provide value if dead. Where's a good position? Behind your tank, behind cover, maybe on the high ground, spamming your abilities. Following up on that, each person in the team needs to operate in the context of the team. Like, you can't play the game without even thinking about your teammates. Even in solo queue, you still have to heal your teammates or provide them support. Shoot enemies going after them to fight them 2v1. You need to help your teammates and operate in the context of your teammates. This includes operating in the context of their position, and you need to be mindful of where they are. If you know where your teammates are, you can, like I said, just go help them and such. The value you provide with most characters is dependent on how you play with them. What this means is the value you provide to your teammates depends on how you play with your teammates. Just another follow-up point on the last one. If you are too far away from your team, you're not going to be providing them any help or any value. Know the enemy team. This is a very important one. The style of game and heroes picked by the enemy will directly influence where you need to position to fight them. An example, an enemy Widowmaker will force you to play more cautiously. If they've got a sniper who can one-shot kill you if they get a headshot, you don't want to be taking unnecessary risks. You want to make sure that you're not in her line of sight if you don't have to be. When you are, you're jumping around, you're being hard to hit. You need to play around cover. An enemy with a flanker DPS, Tracer, for this example, will mean you have to play closer as a team. Now what this means is if you see the enemy has Tracer Genji, that means that they're going for your backline. So as a Zarya, you have to be very aware about where your supports are. Maybe as a support, you have to play closer to one of your teammates or play together as a support duo to stop from being dove upon. You have to play so that way your other teammates, when you are dove upon, can easily get to you. An example of this is Pariso, first point. There are two bridgeways, and often the supports will set up on the bridgeway closer to the point, and the tanks will set up on the bridgeway closer to the enemy spawn. And whenever the supports are dove upon, the friendly tanks can just walk around the bridges and get to you and help you. Where the enemy is impacts your position. where the fight is taking place impacts your position. A good position only remains so if it keeps you in the optimal place to fight the enemy. A good position only remains so if you're getting value from it actively. If you are the only person in the middle of the enemy team, you are dead, and therefore stop providing value. When you are dead, you provide no value. Well, if you're Reinhardt and everybody's surrounding you, you've got the Roadhog, you've got the DPS, you've got the supports, you are most assuredly dead. You are horribly out of position. Because yes, well, Reinhardt wants to be up close and personal, that's only if he has the proper support behind him. And if your supports and your DPS can't get to you, you are out of position compared to your team. Position isn't just compared to the map, it is compared to where your team is, and where the enemy team is. If the enemy team's all around you, but your team isn't, you're out of place. If you are set up, but the enemy is fighting elsewhere, you are not providing value. If you're still on first point, but all of the enemies are on third point, and your team's on third point, you're not over there helping your team fight the enemy team. This is kind of a duh. You have to be where the fight is to get value. The enemy is in a good defensive position, you must adapt your own position to it. Like, this is just a fact of playing the game. Sometimes the enemy will have what seems to be an insurmountable defense. You have to adapt positioning all the time to throw them off. Don't go to the same area twice, they'll expect it. As the fight evolves, so must your position. This is called rotating. There will be an example of this later. But the fight will not stay in some areas, and one team will be pushed back because the other team is pushing forward. And at that point, if your team is being pushed back, you must push back with them. If you are pushing the team forward, you must push the team forward, but not overextend. Moving to a safer or otherwise more advantageous to get better shots. You see this all the time with professional Widowmakers, where as they're pushing the enemy back, the Widowmaker keeps on going farther and farther forward to try and get more and more room to headshot. That's what rotating is to get those safer or otherwise advantageous positions to fight from. Know the map. How can you get a good position if you don't know where the positions are? Each map has its own unique defensive positions and routes to attack from. Look at King's Row here. So this is a good defensive position right here, right behind this choke point. The reason this is because you can funnel all the damage into the choke point in front of it that you can't see here, and you can easily play behind the statue and play behind the building. A good defensive position comes from where can you get cover from. Think about World War I. I know World War I is not Overwatch, but World War I took so long because both sides dug defensive positions called trenches, where it's hard to shoot you because you're in the ground and can't be seen. The better cover you have, the more of you that can't be seen, the better and the easier it is to defend. That's why this area right here is so good, because you can run behind this building and you can run behind this statue. What about routes to attack from? Well, I thought everybody just ran through the choke point trying to attack. In some maps, that is the case, but not in all maps, including King's Row, since we're talking about it. You can actually go through the building on the right-hand side of spawn to bypass the choke point. If you know each route to get to the objective and to get to the enemy team, you can try and circumvent their defenses. Oftentimes, a good offense is when you yourself get your own cover and get high ground like the enemy has. Knowing where the sight lines, pieces of cover, corners, high ground, and health packs are will improve your ability to find a position for your character. Let's break this down. What are sight lines? Abbreviated SL. Sometimes, when I don't have room. Sight lines are like lines you can draw from your character's point of view across the map. So like, if you're standing by the telephone box, you can see into the choke, but you can't see behind the statue. So your sight line, or line of sight, is all the way through here. All the way through here, but not right here. Know where to get the best sight lines for your character. Some characters want long sight lines. Think of a Widowmaker, who sometimes a Widowmaker will jump up to see downwards and see a lot of the map to try and get a good headshot. Think of short range heroes that want short sight lines. Think of like Tracer. Now Tracer isn't necessarily like detrimented by long sight lines, but sometimes she wants to play in close areas so the other enemy can't necessarily see what's going on and help their teammates. Think of Reinhardt. He wants short areas to swing at the enemy, and if he is in a large lengthwise area with long sight lines, he's likely to be sniped before he gets to the enemy. So pieces of cover. Pieces of cover. Cover is good, as I explained, because it obscures the enemy. If this is your hitbox, they can shoot the entirety of you. But if you run behind this piece of cover here, now this is your hitbox, and there's a lot less of you that can be seen, and there's a lot less of you that can be hit. That's why you want cover, is just to reduce the amount of your character that can be hit, and sometimes cover just means complete cover where you can't be seen at all. So if they've got a sniper, and you're this dude standing in the open, you're easy to be hit. But if you run over here, behind the statue, then you can't be seen at all, and now you can't be sniped. It's especially good if you're low health, and anybody can kill you if they shoot you. Corners are specific pieces of cover right here that provide cover for you, but if you walk around them, you can deny your enemy cover on this side. So if you're fighting around this corner, like in a Reinhardt duel, you can run around this corner to try and replenish and not be seen by anybody else. Then when the enemy comes around to hit you, you can start wailing on them. It's very good for short-range gameplay like Reinhardt's. If that was a bit confusing, it'll be explained a bit better with a video clip from Overwatch. High ground. You can't really see high ground in this picture, but high ground is, as mentioned before, and I will cover this multiple times because it is very important. If you are on the high ground, and you are looking down on somebody, it is easier to shoot their head. If you are on low ground and looking at somebody at the high ground, it is harder to shoot their head. That's one benefit. The second benefit is you see more. You see over things when you're up higher. This includes enemy shields in Overwatch. You can see over enemy shields to shoot things. High ground is just incredibly good. Especially if you've got a long enough piece of high ground, you can just run backwards and not even be seen at all. Health packs are really important. Health packs are like these little first shade looking things around the map that give you health back. And health packs are really good in case you're on your own, your supports aren't by you, it's a way to replenish your health. If your supports are busy, you don't have to bug them. If an enemy has a health pack, then you're just giving them free health. You want to control health packs if you know where they are. The more you know about the map, the easier you will find it is to take offensive positions. It's not easy to go on the offense often. A lot of times, there's a choke point that you have to get through, and if you don't know the map, your only route you can see is this choke point. Not very easy. Know the map so you can know where to go. It's impossible to take a position if you do not know what position to take. If you've never seen a map before, then you're experiencing all those positions for the first time. Not all of them are obvious. You need to know beforehand. A lot of positions play with other positions. Consider this choke right here and the choke off screen that you can't see. This choke is so good to defend behind because there's the other choke that they have to walk through. What is a good position? This is a good question. Different for every hero. But fundamentally, there are some things you always should be looking for, no matter what kind of hero you are. This is covering high ground. Even if you're playing Tracer and you think, I don't need the high ground, I'm behind the enemy, I'm on the side of the enemy, you still need cover to be to not be hit when engaging. You need cover to sneak behind them. Cover is so important if you're going on a flank. High ground is also important, especially if the enemy is on the high ground. You kind of have to have it if the enemy's on the high ground, because you can't flank without being on the same elevation as them. You cannot out-heal focus fire from the enemy, so being able to step behind an object for cover is key. If you're Reinhardt and you're walking up with your shield, the entire enemy is going to focus your shield down and break your shield very quickly. And then they're going to focus you down and kill you. So at one point you need to realize, I need to step behind a piece of cover to protect myself and my shield, and that piece of cover can never be broken. That's why cover is so important. High ground has many benefits, and I've mentioned this. It's easier to get headshots, harder to get headshotted. You can back up to break line of sight, and you have greater sight lines. Mentioned all of that. The health pack position is also very important, as it provides you heals without having to bug the supports or non-existent supports, and controlling them denies the opponent free health. You want to have these things, and you'll see in a lot of pro play, they go back and forth over health pack buildings with a health pack in them, or they'll go back and forth over high ground positions like on Parisa. A good position is one that saves you from dying. Out in the open on low ground is a bad position, because if you're out in the open, everybody can shoot you no matter where they're at. And if you're on the low ground, it's easier to get headshots and it's harder to run away. If you're on the low ground, your opponent will see you for longer on the high ground on most maps. A great position is one that provides your kit value, or a great position is one that allows you to use your kit. A kit is your primary fire, your abilities, your secondary fire, your ultimate, all of that. A great position is one that allows you to use it to its greatest extent, to the greatest amount of value. An example is Ana on the high ground in King's Row. She's on the high ground, she can see the entire team to heal, has distance, so she isn't under real threat, has a backup position in case the fight moves, and is above the fight for easier anti-nades. Think about where you get the most use from your abilities. Think about Genji and his wall jumping. You get the most use from his abilities if you're jumping around in the air, jumping over walls, not easily hit. Another example from King's Row is Reinhardt on Streets Phase. I'll explain Streets Phase in a moment, if you don't know. The bins on Streets Phase allow you to play close range with your hammer. You can't really play long range, so this is utilizing the position you're in to increase the effectiveness of your kit. The width of the street means your shield can cover much of the team. Utilizing the position, you'd rather have a position where the enemy can't get around your shield than one where they can to provide damage. It's just using your shield better. The corners on Street Phase gives you great cover to fall back on. I explained cover already. The choke point nature of it means Fire Strike is very good. Fire Strike excels when there's not much room for the enemy to run, or where you can hit multiple enemies because they're all grouped together. Choke points are a great example of this. It's just Streets Phase in general. So here I am to explain the points positioning on King's Row, because it's a great example for positioning, this time with the Ana example. So here's the high ground I'm talking about. Get to it from down here, and it leads over there. Now from here, if your team is set up right at this choke, right here, which they typically are, you can see the entire team to heal them. You can, even if you poke around here, see the choke if you need to deal damage. You can come over here and see this choke. You can see this area here that the enemy sometimes comes from to sleep it, or just shoot it and tell your teammates.
Keep an eye out.
So you can just generally see anything that's going to happen on Team Rogue. The only blind spot you have is right across the statue. But you're not a damage dealer. You don't need to see across that statue to deal damage to the enemy. And your team shouldn't be across that statue. That's not generally a great place to hold. And there's a reason for that. No time to go into it now. Your team usually holds right here, or right here where we are standing, for a good reason. So now we covered the first point, line of sight. You'll see the entire fight. The second point is the value you get from her abilities. So the first one is pretty simple with line of sight. It's the sleep. You can see everything, you can sleep everything. The other is the anti-nade. The anti-nade is this E ability here that when it hits, heals your teammates or stops the enemy from being healed. If you're on the ground, it's hard to hit because typically the enemy will have a shield. Maybe the enemy will have a shield like a Sigma or a Winston or a Reinhardt that you can't anti-nade through because they'll hit the shield and pop. But from the high ground, you can kind of chuck it. Let's wait for it to come back. Chucking it like that will get over a shield right here and anti-nade the entire enemy team. Massive value. And the same can be said of sleep. You can sleep over shields right here if the enemy is far enough back. That's what we're looking for. So, a fight is never going to stay at this choke for the entire time, and your enemy might push your team back all the way to the choke point right here. And if that happens, you're not in such a great position, because before, your teammates were in front of you, keeping you from taking damage. Now, your teammates are back here, and you're in front of them. This position is still okay for that. It's much better than being on the ground. That means that an enemy can now try and get you, and that your teammates can't easily stop them. So that's why it's so great, this position. You can come over here, and look, you can see the point. You can barely see this choke point. You can see all of this choke point. This is also a really good place to set up. And if this doesn't work, you can come over here and you can see this entire area here. Such a great position for Ana. Because Ana is all about, if you can see the entire fight, you can help your teammates by healing them or shooting them, you can harm the enemies, but you just want to see everything that's going on, so you can heal everybody no matter where they are in the fight. Or you can nade everybody no matter where they are in the fight. And that's why that position right there,
over there,
is so good. Because that position right there is very mobile to get you over here. It doesn't take very long. But also sees so much of the early stages of the fight, and over here can see the last stages of the fight. Very nice. Here we are with Reinhardt on Streets phase. And before, when talking about Ana, I was talking about Ana on defense, but what I'm about to say here about Reinhardt applies for both offense and defense. This right here, the second part, is called the Streets phase. There's a capture point back there, and another short little payload push back there, but this is the longest part of the payload push lengthwise. You have to push it through here and all the way over there. What I'm talking about with the bend or the corners is this part of the Streets phase right here. And this is a really good space for Reinhardt to play in. And the reason is, first of all, you have these corners right here. And as you can see, if I'm up against this corner, the only people I can see are right there, very short range. And of course, I can kind of play around this cover too. But also, as you can see, there's not much places for the enemy to go. If I fire strike, I'm likely to hit somebody, just because this is relatively close quarter compared to other maps or other parts of maps. Also, the same is true for the hammer. You can see I'm swinging, I'm taking up massive space right here. Just, you can see the hurt box, just kind of generally based off of the animations, is massive compared to the width of the map. Now, the reason for cover for Reinhardt is so big, just to explain this, just a little bit of a mechanics about Reinhardt, is the shield only lasts for so long, and you don't want your shield to die. That's how you defend your teammates in case of bad things happening. So you only want to use your shield to block important stuff, or when you're trying to get to a fight. So you want to back to a corner where you have cover, like right here. You let your shield recharge, let your healers heal you, fight whoever comes over here. And then you don't keep your shield up, you just swing your hammer. But this is why this area for Reinhardt is so good. It's so close quarter. Even his range move benefits from how little width there is. And of course, it is short range, so pins are much better.
Teaching this thing a lesson.
In conclusion, know how your hero plays and how they get value, so you know where, in what position, they more easily thrive. Know where you should be in relation to the other players, your friendly and enemy players. The game is played based off of how the enemy and your teammates and you all interact. And part of that is where your position is so that you can interact. So know where you should be to make plays. Know your locale, know your map, know where you're playing. It is hard to position well if you don't know the map. If you were to take anything away from this video, take away those 3 points. From those 3 points, you can learn how to position all by yourself. Until next time, have a great day.